Hey everyone, Tactics here, bringing you another Mythic Amirdrassil boss guide, this time covering either the 5th or 6th boss of the raid in NYMUE, otherwise known as NYMUE. I'm sure you've heard plenty of other names here people have given this boss. Anyways, we're going to be going through what's changed on Mythic difficulty here, some prep work to help your group get it down, including useful WeakAuras and MRT note stuff, and then just our general strategy for the boss itself. I am going to assume you have a general idea of the heroic mechanics, so I don't need to spend much time covering those and can instead focus on the mythic specific stuff, so just keep that in mind. Otherwise, let's talk about what those changes actually are. So the big one is there is a new soak that's going to show up here, and I'll show you actually what these look like here. So you can see timer red soak, 20-ish seconds in. You're going to see the soak pop up. It's going to be red. It's always going to be in melee. This is called Ephemeral Flora. There it is, boom, right on top of me, easy to see. Basically, you have 10 seconds to soak this one from full to 0, otherwise it's going to wipe your raid. And again, this will always spawn in melee. So what this is, it's a melee DPS kind of job, melee healer, that kind of thing. You will rotate always to soak this. You'll see here in a second, all the melee is going to move over immediately. As you can see, they left that green spawn and immediately come over to this red one. It's always the highest priority because you have that 10-second kind of timer on it. And as you saw as well, they all crossed over these lines. That is going to be a common theme. You do not care so much about your dot stacks from crossing lines. You 100% go for soaks. Whether that's a red soak or a green soak, it does not matter. It is worth the, of course, making sure you don't wipe with the red soak, but also the raid damage reduction from reducing your stacks of soaking the green puddles. Also worth you taking a couple ticks of that dot, so keep that in mind. Soak, 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 and that goes for everyone, not just melee. Ranged, we also have kind of spread out in the back of the room here with like relatively assigned positions based on, where they're going to be going in the phase. So that can help as well. Pre-positioning, kind of designating areas for people to generally be in so they can get soaks in those areas as well. Now, the other thing on Mythic is that whenever you soak any soak to completion, so whether it's going to be this red one, whether it's a green one, any soak is now going to leave behind a 10-yard swirly that detonates after 3 seconds. So you're going to see here, we're doing this, swirly, boom, and that obviously you don't want to be in. There's an interesting decision here sometimes. If you ever have to pick, hey, I'm going to eat the swirly, or hey, I'm going to eat the stun beam, always pick to eat the swirly. The swirly deals about the same damage as the stun beam. The stun beam's over, 3 seconds, of course, but the stun beam just leaves you open to so many other possibilities. Always, if you have to choose, obviously ideally you hit none of them, but if you have to choose between eating the swirly and eating the stun beam, always eat the swirly. And again, this is 3 seconds to get out of this, before the actual detonation happens, so keep that in mind. Bombs work just like heroic here. Something to keep in mind later on, specifically for the last ad phase, positioning on these can be a little bit weird, but in general, this is also going to be something you want to keep in mind, because the other big thing on Mythic is that there is actually a third ad directly across at the back of the room from where NYMUE is, and that's called the Manifested Dream, and basically this spawns in the intermission with the other 2 Warden ads, so you kind of need to split your raid up into 3 groups, because of course when you go in to fight this ad, you're going to get a debuff, basically meaning you can only fight this ad 1 time, so your DPS needs to be split, and a healer of course in each group as well, such that you have the damage to both kill that mythic ad in time, which is about 30-ish seconds, as well as to kill the 2 warden ads at around the same time as each other, because on Mythic as well, if there's a 15-second gap between killing those warden ads, it triggers that Verdant Rend raid wipe again. So generally, that's not really an issue because you're splitting your DPS evenly anyways to deal with that mythic ad, but just something to keep in mind now. 3 equal groups here. Basically, tanks, you don't need to go to the back ever because that mob is untankable. And what that mob does basically is, I can actually fast forward to the intermission here so maybe you can kind of see. Of course, again, I'm a tank, so that's the kind of circle you can step into, and that gives you the debuff. And range, be careful. If you're assigned to be in this area as a ranged, you can accidentally get this debuff, and that can kill you later on when you need to go back into this circle. So keep that in mind. Don't be too close to this area when the actual intermission is beginning. And other than that, this boss, you're not really going to be able to see it from my POV, unfortunately, but it really just kind of does frontals that you need to avoid in that area, and some passive ticking damage, and that's why you need a healer in each group as well. So that's kind of what the new ad is, and same deal. These patterns are going to change basically throughout the fight and make it easier or harder for you to actually kill this boss. Now, before we actually get too deep into the strategy here, let's talk about ERT notes and WeakAuras. There's going to be one big one. If you saw my other Mythic Boss video, you're going to be familiar with this. It's the Northern Sky kind of assignments WeakAura they have linked in the description below if you want to use it. Really makes a ton of great WeakAuras here. And what you're looking for here is this NYMUE Mythic Ad assignment part of it. And basically, if you do the note like this, with the NS start and the NS end, you can assign each set of ads, which player is going to which group, and then this will feed into the actual thing here. And if you saw maybe earlier, rewind, this arrow pops up on your screen and it tells you where to go, and you can move this around, obviously. This is based on you facing the boss, so facing NYMUE, right, middle, left. Obviously, you can do this however you want to do it, as long as you configure the WeakAura accordingly. And obviously, this just helps because your groups are going to be rotating a bit outside of your tanks and maybe a healer. There's pretty much everyone is going to be at a different station at some point. So keep that in mind. This can just make things a lot easier in terms of organization. Players don't need to think. The WeakAura literally tells them where to go in the intermission. So very, very useful there. All right, so we've got changes and we've got mythic stuff to help you, WeakAuras and that kind of thing. So let's go beginning here, kind of as the fight progresses in further and further. Lusting on pull. One thing to note, I do think that the DPS check on this boss fight is fading exceptionally quickly, if not already gone. And so if you're watching this video, there's a good chance that the best thing for you to do in terms of progression is to 5 heal this fight. As eye level goes up, that DPS check is just going to continue to become irrelevant. And the big thing here is that, with those, the bombs going out, people needing to drop them off, people needing to do soaks, you can see range can get into issues, basically, depending on how many healers you have, how many range you have, where they're dropping things. And so having a 5th healer can save you a lot of deaths, a lot of wipes, and it kind of does mean that if you accidentally lose your healer or one of your healers at any point, you can actually continue on with the pull without it being too much of a big deal. So if you're watching this video, I'm probably going to say 5 heal this boss fight if you can. 4 healing obviously is done. We 4 healed this fight, but you're going to see basically we killed the boss like well before the enrage. I can fast forward to the very end here. That's too far. Yeah, we killed the boss 35 seconds before enrage. So there was plenty of time here, and we 4 healed it. So you can definitely drop, especially with higher gear, a healer or a DPS rather for an extra healer here, and just make this fight way, way, way safer. Something to keep in mind. Otherwise, getting into it here, like I said, priority is always soaking. No matter who you are, no matter where you are, soak, soak, soak. Melee is always going to be soaking the red growth. Range don't really need to come in to deal with that red one. Melee, again, if you have enough, I think we have one. We've got 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 to 10-ish melee here, and that's more than enough to soak these red flowers in time. And whenever a red flower does spawn, you see basically everyone just immediately move over to it, get that soak. Boom, it's right on top of me. That's easy, but yeah, get that soak ASAP. And that's the most important one, and then you can go back to soaking all the green stuff here. Range is just constantly moving to green stuff. You can see behind me, like there's people just moving around soaking this green stuff. For these drops, what we did is we assigned tanks to drop on one side and melee to drop on the other side, and then range will kind of drop in their area behind us. And so you see tanks for us is on the right side. Again, if you're facing NYMUE, melee is on the left. You see here, we're giving ourselves a lot of space because we found if you dropped a little bit too close here, it could crunch you, specifically the 3rd tank, to actually drop the flower, because there's 3 tank busters basically that go out in this phase. 1 tank is going to have to deal with 2. It's that very, very last one where if you, for example, if I had dropped it here, it would have been a little bit crunched. It's doable for sure, but it's definitely a bit crunchy in terms of space. So you can just give yourself a ton of space, and like I mentioned, the DPS check is completely irrelevant. So just coming out here, giving both your co-tank and yourself more space to dodge these lines. You see, I just wait here, then, cut through the gap. Of course, not taking damage from lines during this buff, and then come back in. In terms of the tank swap, be ready to take damage when you taunt. You are going to be taunting basically immediately after the actual tank debuff goes out, so the other tank doesn't get blasted while they're running away from the boss. That does mean you're going to take a single blast here with that nature damage amp, so just be aware of it. Make sure you have like a defensive CD running, and you'll be fine here. And notably, again, beam timing can be kind of rough as you're coming in here. As a paladin, you see I just bubble actually to taunt back with my debuff, so I don't have to worry too much with about that damage amp, about the beams either. I can just get into range and not worry about them. Speaking of paladin, actually, if you are running a prompt paladin, spell warding and spell warding usage on this fight is usually going to be on stationary healers during their cooldown. So like a holy priest, or maybe even a disc priest during their ramp, or like a resto druid on tranquility is what I used it for in this fight. So that's kind of a decent use. They can just kind of plant in the middle of the room and get some big raid CDs out whenever you need them to. So keep that in mind. And I believe, depending on your talents, you can get 1 or 2 of these off over the course of the fight, so make sure you do keep that in mind. If you are running a prop paladin, it can make healing a little bit easier for one of your healers. Not like it's massively impactful or anything like that, but that is this kind of phase here. And obviously with the lines, it becomes a little bit different each phase, but basically the key thing here: aggressively soak the green and red puddles, prio the red over the green. If there's ever, sometimes they overlap, the red and the green. Make sure that you get in the red one first, even if it's only the red one. Get out of the swirl and then come back into the green, because the green ones, because they also decay over time, if you're in that overlap of a green and a red, the green is going to detonate way sooner, and that means you have to move out of the red. And because that's timer based, that can be bad. So always, if there's a green and a red one near each other, just be in the red one and then leave and then come back to the green one. So keep that in mind. A little thing that I think wiped us maybe a time or two, or got us close to wiping a time or two. There's something to be aware of there. Flower drops, again, tanks to one side, melee to the other side. Range, making sure they're not taking up space of both the mythic ad and the left and right ad. They need to make sure they've left a gap, and you're going to see here the full bloom. In terms of soaking this full bloom, we did tanks. You can do it with a major cooldown if you have the damage amp. If you don't have the damage amp, like I don't here, I literally am just like in my consecrate, and maybe there's a Eye of Tears up, but not a big deal. Just in my consecrate. Middle group, it doesn't take this. There's going to be a lock gate. You're going to see right behind me. And they're just going to go up and take the lock gate together. They make sure to go together because, of course, you're going to get a stack and you're going to take some damage. So you want to be with your healer when you do lock gate. And just know as well, if you're soaking this as the tank with the debuff, it's going to be pretty scary. So either pop a major CD or have an immune class on your side. Use an immunity instead of you soaking. So like Rogue Cloak, Paladin, Bubble, that kind of thing. They can eat the soak for you instead. And honestly, I think on one time like a red paladin did it without an immunity because of that avoidance and just that passive mitigation of a paladin OP. So that's true too. And as you get more gear, you can probably natty soak it as a DPS or even, so maybe you won't have the debuff tank do it and waste a defensive CD, but something to keep in mind there. And this is very straightforward, right? We're going to our sides. Oh, there we go, playing. We're going to our sides here. We're killing our ad. Make sure you get the kick relatively quickly, and you're obeying, the lines here. And again, notice these are the ranged placements, and took a while to kind of figure out where to place them. Sometimes they would cut us off, sometimes they would block off the middle group, and so it's good to kind of get an idea of where exactly you can place these flowers, and not to block off the cycle wardens or that manifested dream mythic ad in the middle of the room either. So range need to kind of figure that out for them. Otherwise, the ad's the same. You just have to deal with those reclamation swirlies when you actually soak the surging growths in this phase. Notably as well, so when this ad dies here, so there's going to be some surging growths here. I probably should have stayed behind here as the tank and soaked this. And so if you ever do have any left here at the end of the phase, make sure you do that. I am in one here soaking that one, but make sure you do, at least as a tank, because you can live out during this continuum. You don't need to be in this stack here. Make sure you do finish those off just to get rid of, because we're going to go in this phase with a bit of damage, more than we should have. Again, with higher gear, with a 5th healer, it's not as big a deal, but just a small thing a tank can do in this phase, because they don't need to be in all these defensives. They could have gotten rid of these stacks easily here. Anyways, rinse and repeat here, slightly different pattern. Drops as a tank are the same in this phase, notably, like I mentioned, in the last phase, or second last phase rather, the one after this, it's a bit more important on the positioning, and I'll show you that ad phase as well at the end here. But essentially, the gist of this fight is just the same. The only difference is obviously the RNG of where the puddles spawn that you need to soak, and dealing with the slightly different variation of these lines on the ground. But again, as I mentioned, the lines on the ground are never really a priority. As long as you're not giga stacking yourself up, you want to always be focused on getting these surging growth soaks down ASAP. Again here, tank POV. So you're gonna, I guess I can show you what the third tank POV kind of looks like. So again, I'm going pretty far out here, basically dropping this as far as I can, because the first soak is pretty free timing wise. The second one's kind of during a stun line, and the last one is kind of very, very current. So you see, I'm just backed up here, bubbling in to get my taunt, popping my spell warding on the resto druid, like I said, so we can trank. Moving forward here, let's go to my next soak. Obviously, again, always prioritizing these red soaks, and I'm going out here. And you can see pretty far back, but I can just kind of slot between these here. Beams are a little rough because of how far back I went, so we have the red paladin do the soak here, and I just wait by the ad. Look at this here. Basically, there's another line here, so your room gets cut in half compared to the first phase, and then it gets cut again in the last phase. So just keep in mind, again, wardens can never really cross this barrier. Otherwise, it is a wipe. In terms of damage, again, we're going to be relatively even here across the board. But one thing you can do is commit your pots on the third set of ads, especially, you know, again, watching boss health at that point. It's relatively low, and then you can just kind of not worry about the damage on boss. Commit those potions to that third ad set just to make sure everything does die here. But again, not really much to talk about in this phase. Let me show you the final ad phase, just because that one's a little sketchy. Here it is coming up. So we're getting our soaks, moving to our ad, and you're going to see, yeah, look at these lines, right? Boom. And so that's why this spawn is here and not here, right? Because if we had put it here, all of a sudden this cuts all the way like here into our space, and you have almost no area to actually drop this. So just, if you are a tank dropping these puddles pretty far back, be careful in this last phase, because you can actually force your ad to be out of space. And same deal with a melee on the other side. Do not drop it too far back as a melee DPS. Honestly, melee never need to drop it too far back, because you're not even necessarily going to get as many spawns as the tanks are, just because of the RNG involved. But you don't want to give everyone enough space in case you get a couple. So keep that in mind. But yeah, just third ads wave just before it in that third boss phase, I guess. Don't go to the edge here with your drops. Go a little bit less just to give yourself some room here. And notably as well, this boss does do, you know, going for a walk a bit here. As you can see, they do this because they're big, and I don't know, whatever it is, for some reason big mobs like to walk around the tank in a circle sometimes. Be careful. Don't be too close to any of these lines. You do not want the boss to accidentally walk around you in a circle and touch one of those lines. That definitely happened to us one time, so be aware of that. Be very, very careful. And you can see how scary this phase is too, right? Your goal here in terms of damage stacks is somewhere between 9 to 11 in terms of those, just to be on track for damage and killing your cycle wardens. And you can see here, I'm actually out now doing my job, soaking these puddles. Good thing to note, I did the right thing. Let's go. But yeah, from here, again, boss is just repeating. This is a very, very repetitive fight. The mechanics are similar. It's just, you know, the slight RNG aspect of who the mechanics go on, where they spawn, and dealing with that with a different line pattern. So essentially here, once you start to get these phases, it's going to be rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. But you know, that is this boss, guys. Hopefully it does help you out. And if it does, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like it. Mythic boss guides for all of the rest of the Amirdrassil raid and beyond into the war within even. So make sure you stick around for next expansion. If you have any questions at all, feel free to leave those down in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer. And remember to stop by my Twitch channel at Tactics. Say hi. I stream all my raid progress and keep pushing over there. As always, thank you to all of my supporters over on Patreon. I could not keep making this content without you guys. Otherwise, thanks everyone so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.